2015 Pennsylvania, March 31st. Route 645 north to Route 501. We are back in Pennsylvania again, and we camped in our truck camper at the AT parking lot off of Route 645. It was a very nice parking lot. However, it was a steep drive up to the top of a hill, and it was a rough ride here. When we reached the parking lot, I discovered that my coffee jar had fell out of the cabinet and smashed onto the floor, and I lost some of my coffee for the trip. A big bummer. The trail started out with way too many rocks and boulders. However, it was a beautiful day after the coldest winter in the month of February this year, with 3 feet of snow on the ground. We are happy to see the ground here and some buds on the trees with some wild chives popping out of the ground. It was a nice 70-degree day with blue skies, and it felt like heaven here. This day is a gift, and I should focus on the gift and not on my coffee grounds with the broken glass particles on the camper floor. The trail here was nice with great views of all the Pennsylvania farmlands below us as it followed the ridgeline. We reached a view with lots of people here. We had seen some Amish people here. Wow, our first time seeing the Amish in Pennsylvania. They were dressed in their Amish homemade clothing, and some were handing out Mennonites' church pamphlets to the crowd and to us. Someone was getting ready to soar off the ledge with a hang glider, a first for this too. We watched with the growing crowd as he jumped off the ledge, and the thermal lifted him up higher in the sky. We went to the ledge after he took off and saw another one that was landing below us in a cow field. This cliff is a popular place for the local people as well as a tourist attraction, so it gets a lot of people on the trail and the cliffs here. There are 2 locations with easy access to the cliffs. The local teens here are very polite, so much different than they are where we live. They say "excuse me" a lot and were very courteous as we passed them on the trail. April 1st, Sherwood Drive north to Darlington Shelter. I remembered when we had parked here on Sherwood Drive in June of 2009 as soon as I saw the parking lot. It is in a very residential area and we cannot camp here. There is a small footbridge over a small stream with small wooden steps going up a small bank and into the woods. There is also some bloodroot blooming here too. It is a sunny day with the temperature around 75 degrees. We reached a new underpass footpath that goes under Route 944 that was not here the last time that we had done this section. Dave was admiring the stone bridge that we walked under. The treadway here was not too rocky or muddy, with some violets, flowers, and bloodroot blooming here. We found a frame of an old Model T car besides the trail. The trail here was wide, and it looked like it might have been an old road or a driveway. We also found what appeared to be the remains of an old house, a wood stove, some plumbing parts, and some daffodils. The trail climbed very hard up over rocks and boulders up to Blue Mountain. We found a bench that was made out of stone when we reached the top with an awesome view. We finally reached Darlington Shelter, our turnaround point for today, after a 1,000-foot gain in elevation, and met 2 section hikers heading to Duncannon while their wives were at the Hershey Spas for the day. We took our break here and ate our lunch. I went over to check the privy, which looked new, like the shelter. It had a sign on it that named it as the Taj Mahal. On our way out, we met a local man on the trail who had told us that there was no camping allowed on the Cumberland Valley section of the trail. He also said that a convicted sex offender had been living on the trail here and that he was arrested by the police. I think he was telling us that we cannot camp in the trailhead parking lot. Bernheisel Bridge Road south to Appalachian Drive. It is the same day, and we drove over to Bernheisel Bridge Road, and we parked on the side of the road near Interstate 81 next to the AT. We are a little tired from our hike to Darlington Shelter and back, and are doing just a short hike. We are picking up a section of the trail that we had done when we had crossed Interstate 81 in June of 2009. Our plan is to hike to Appalachian Drive and then turn around and head back. We had remembered when we had walked through a cow field from the north to Interstate 81, where we had turned around in June. The trail started near another cow field with a large farm. The farms in this area are so large and picturesque. The trail then went behind a large warehouse with several trailers and trucks. We crossed over a footbridge that had went over busy Route 11, traffic was moving so fast that it was like crossing a highway. The trail went through a small walkway with some trees and a commercial area on one side and a new trailer park on the other side, before we crossed over a railroad track and into another farm field. We reached Appalachian Drive in a residential area and turned around and headed back to the truck. I liked this section with all the cows in the field and all the flowers, mostly violets and bloodroots. However, this area is being developed with warehouses and residential areas and is starting to lose steam farmlands before Mr. Farmlavern. We had covered this section because it is part of the Appalachian Trail, and if we had lived in this area, we would most likely never hike this area again, as we do on weekend trips in the New England section of the AT. We drove over to the Route 850 parking area, where in June of 2010 we had hiked separately from Duncannon, and I had headed north, and Dave had started here on Route 850 heading south. April 2nd, Route 850 south to Darlington Shelter. I had woken up at around 4 o'clock this morning to the sounds of heavy rain and was able to fall back to sleep. Luckily, when I woke up again at around 8 o'clock, the rain had stopped. The morning was cool and cloudy when we got back onto the trail. We climbed up through another farm field with great views of the mountains. This side of the mountain that we had climbed up yesterday was much steeper with several PUDs. At around noon, we found a through hiker that had camped off the trail, and it appeared that the hiker was still sleeping inside the tent. We reached Darlington Shelter, and Dave went to use the privy, and when he returned, we headed back down to the truck. Route 641 south to Boyer Road. We moved over to the parking lot off of Route 641 and headed south to Boyer Road. This is just a short section that we needed to do to join up with where we had left off when we had hiked to Boyer Road in April of 2009. The trail went through a field before we reached the road. Sometimes we can only hike a short distance to meet up where we have to turn around due to time. We often have to do many short hikes to connect pieces of the trail, and this is what we are doing today. Route 641 north to Appalachian Drive. This is our third hike of the day. After returning from Boyer Road, we have continued north to where we turned around just yesterday. This is the Cumberland Valley section of the trail. It was much longer than I had expected it to be, a 10-mile hike out and back. We had hiked through miles and miles of open field walks through cow and corn fields. Then the trail went through a small corridor of woods with numerous road crossings in a very residential area. It is nice that they have the trail in some woods and is not a road walk through the Cumberland Valley. It was a mostly cloudy day today, and we had seen a lot of flowers along the trail. We reached Appalachian Drive and returned to the parking lot. However, we could not camp here. We moved over to Boyer Road and backed up the camper onto the trail, which was wide enough, and we ended up having a nice night here, April 3rd. Route 233 south to Old Forge Road. We drove over to Route 233, and Dave had dropped me off here. We have to hike separate on this section, as it is too long to hike out and back before dark. Dave is driving over to Old Forge Road, and he will be heading north towards me. He will be climbing up to Buzzard Peak at an elevation of 1,946 feet. He will have the steeper climb and will pass Tumbling Run Shelter. Today was partly cloudy with the temperatures starting off in the 50s and reaching the 60s by noon. The trail started off going through a muddy area, and the trail going south was not too hard. I headed up the trail and reached Snowy Mountain at Snowy Mountain Road, a dirt road which had a parking lot and a tower. However, I never did see the tower. I could see some distant mountains, and I could see the South Mountain Restoration Center below. The trail walked along a ridgeline and reached the Pipeline Vista, where I had some views of the mountain, but not any nice views. I continued on the trail and reached Chimney Rocks, which was the most scenic area of this trail. I reached Dave, and we stopped to eat our lunch on a log off the side of the trail. We are actually moving pretty well on the trail and making better time than I had thought that we would. I left Dave and continued on the trail, which had become rockier as it reached Buzzard Peak. The trail then descended rather steeply to Tumbling Run Shelters that had two large and very nice shelters with a picnic table under a pavilion. One of the shelter was marked for snorers and the other for non-snorers. It was a nice area with some tent sites and a clean privy. There were also some outdoor magazines inside the shelter for hikers to read. I reached Old Forge Road and I drove over to pick up Dave. We had got off the trail earlier than I had thought and drove back over to Route 233. Route 233 north to Rocky Mountain Shelter. We parked on Route 233, and again we are doing a short section to where we had come to this shelter from the south in June of 2009. The woods here had a lot of rocks as it climbed up for about 0.3 of a mile to the shelter. I had remembered this shelter from the last time that we were here. We had met a thru hiker here who told us that he had started the AT in February from Georgia and had been hiking about 24 miles a day and had made it all the way to here in 3 months. We turned around and headed back down to our truck. April 4th, Penmar Road north to Old Forge Road. We drove over to Route 233, Penmar Road in Maryland, where Dave dropped me off, and he will be driving over to Old Forge Road in Pennsylvania. We were here in June of 2010 when we had completed Maryland. We got to the trail parking lot at 8 o'clock. It had been a stressful drive finding the trail as it is in a residential area. This area is really getting developed. I started the trail with a huge descent to a stream with a footbridge over it. A sign on the bridge warned hikers not to filter this water as it is polluted from nearby factories. Next, I climbed up steeply to a summit with no views before crossing a road and then reaching busy Route 16 with an AT parking lot and a nature trail here. This section of the trail had a lot of rocks after crossing Route 16. I had thought that I would meet up with Dave after an hour after crossing Route 16, and I was happy when I had heard him singing in the distance. He always listens to his MP3 player when he hikes alone and sings to the songs. He had not seen me as I was walking towards him and looked shocked when he saw me. We sat in a nice area that had a stone fire ring and ate our lunch. There was a spring here that we filtered our water, and I saw some rhododendrons and my first trout lilies on this trip. After leaving Dave, I climbed up and then descended, which had felt like a 2-hour descent. I reached Deer Lick Shelter that again had 2 lean-to with a picnic table, a bear box, and a privy. I left the shelter and walked through a nice pine forest and then into a hardwood forest with no rocks. It was nice with a smooth footpath. I had seen 2 small holly trees that I had never seen before on the trail. I had never knew that they had grown so big in the woods, and I had never seen them so big like this. Several dogs had come running down the trail towards me. I had never seen so many loose dogs on the trail before. 6 dogs of different breeds. A couple was with the dogs, and the woman was carrying a big bag filled with something. She asked me if anyone was in the shelter. I told her that no one was in the shelters yet. I believe that she must have been bringing trail magic to the hikers. The trail continued down with some small rocks on the path, but not too bad. I crossed a nice footbridge over Antietam Stream and reached Antietam Shelter. It was a nice log-style shelter with white chalking between the logs. It was in a very nice area right next to Antietam Stream. The trail walked through the Old Forge picnic area located in Michaud State Forest. It's known for its picnicking facilities and as a trailhead for the Appalachian Trail where the truck was. I was really wiped out by the time that I had reached the truck. I drove over to Penmar Road to pick up Dave, and he was in the parking lot waiting for me. He had got off the trail about 2 hours before I arrived with the truck.